Chapter 15. I might rest all that I have said respecting the peculiarities of St. Luke upon this chapter, the one in his Gospel which has probably exercised most influence upon the mind of Christendom in all periods. But I should be sorry, for the sake of using this advantage, to separate this passage from those which precede it, or to suggest the notion that there is any break in the line of the writer's thoughts. The exclusiveness of the Pharisee and of the Jewish nation as embodied in him has been brought out before us in all that we have lately been reading. That exclusiveness has been exhibited as the anti-Christian principle, the one which must hinder the Jew from believing in him who was come as the King and Shepherd of men. It is in this character, I conceive, that St. Luke presents that sin which St. Matthew makes us feel to be an outrage upon the law and the prophets, the fulfillment and completion of all the evils which they had denounced. The parable of the prodigal son has seemed to most persons to contain a hint of the Gentile economy, as well as an implicit condemnation of the Jew, who would not have his brother received back with music and dancing. Yet this has been rather the feeling of commentators than of the people. They have protested against any view of the parable which shall rob them of its distinct personal application, which shall make it not a message to the individual prodigal, but to all who will claim for themselves that character. They are right. The sure witness of the heart that this parable expresses the very inmost mind of God cannot be set aside to make it square with any interpretations, however reasonable, however seemingly consonant with the circumstances and intention of the evangelist. But if we really look to this discourse of our Lord's for a revelation of the divine purpose, we shall find that all the different views of it, which become in themselves either dry and scholastic or narrow and partial, are pervaded by a higher light which harmonizes them. In the first place, we should take the incidents of the story simply as they stand. The parable is not a tale about some distant beings. Actual publicans and sinners were about our Lord, actual Pharisees were murmuring, "This man receiveth sinners and eateth with them." Of these sinners our Lord surely speaks when he says that the shepherd leaves the 99 in the wilderness to seek the one sheep that was lost. Of these, when he speaks of the woman sweeping the house diligently till she finds her piece of money. We shall misunderstand St. Luke greatly and St. Paul more if we suppose that they concern themselves chiefly about Gentiles as such. They are born Jews. All their heart and sympathies are essentially Jewish. But they have found out that to be Jews they must be men. It is a gospel to men, a covenant with men they require, and therefore with the Gentiles or with all nations. The remark is surely obvious enough. My reader may almost smile that I state it with so much emphasis. But I do not think he knows how much the commentators, how much the Christian world, how much he and I have forgotten it, or what incalculable confusion and loss have ensued from this forgetfulness. If we can once fairly rid ourselves of it, I believe the Gospel of St. Luke and the Epistles of St. Paul will come out to us as quite new books, new, though they are essentially the old books, with the very words we have read from childhood taken even more literally and simply than we took them then. With this one thought on our mind, we shall come to the story of the younger and the elder son without the least fear that we shall be cheated of any of its individual significance, if it should comprehend the widest views of God's purposes in the history of the world. If the prodigal is spoken of from the very first as a son, if the hard-hearted elder brother in the field is told, "All that I have is thine," we must be prepared to ask ourselves manfully whether these are not the primary facts and laws of the new dispensation, whether the gospel is not a claim for men as men to be sons of God, an assertion that they must be prodigals, joining themselves to citizens of the country and feeding swine till they know that to be the case. And that if they do know it, the condition of their enjoying it and being the better for it is that they should recognize the right of all, the most outcast, to the title, and should rejoice when they come back with a new and childlike delight to claim it. The view of God's purposes in all his dealings with mankind, which the parable thus considered sets forth, is indeed most comfortable to the reader of Gentile as well as Jewish history. But it interprets still more remarkably the modern world than the old, the right which Christendom has had to claim for all its sons and daughters' sonship to God, the impossibility of attaching anything but a narrow and formal meaning to the ordinance which stamps us Christians if it does not proclaim that truth to each one of us. At the same time, it contains the most earnest encouragement spread far and wide the gospel, that is to say, the good news to men of their sonship, and a warning of the great guilt by turning baptism into a plea for exclusiveness, into a denial of that human privilege which it asserts and upon which its glory rests. But along with this general force, the parable carries in it the history of each man who comes to himself, showing how that return to human sanity can be nothing else than the discovery of an actual Father, how this discovery implies the acknowledgement of an attraction and influence proceeding from him, a confession that he has sought for the lost sheep, has swept diligently for the piece of money. And here we see how the lines of St. Matthew and St. Luke, starting from different points, meet and coincide. The one shows us Christ revealing a Father, the other Christ bestowing a Spirit, but the Spirit guides the lost child to the Father. The moment his heart is awakened by that touch, he knows from whence it must have proceeded.